Hi, I'm Dr. Robert Cohen, and today I'm going to show you a really fast way to solve percent problems on the SAT and ACT. This is a typical problem you'll see on the SAT or ACT. They'll take some number. It will either be they'll give you the number or more often the variable, and then they'll say something like some number x is increased by 20%, then decreased by 30%. What's the final number? What's the result? So to do this, first of all, x is increased by 20%. When you're increasing something by some percent, that means you're taking the initial value and you are adding to it 20% of that initial value. So how do we figure out 20% of the initial value? Well, what is 20% of some value? It's the same as saying 20 out of 100, taking 20 100ths of that value. So we multiply the value by 20 100ths to take 20% of it. And instead of writing out 20 100ths, we can just simplify this to 0.2. So 0.2 times x is 20% of x. A really quick way to remember this is you take the percent and you move the decimal to the left 2 spaces, and you get the percent in a decimal form you can use to multiply by. So move the decimal over 2 to the left, and we get 0.2. So 20% of some number x is 0.2 times x. So if x is increased by 20%, we're taking the original x, 1x, we're adding to it 20% of x, okay? But there's a quick, even faster way to do this. Instead of saying 1x plus 0.2x, we can just say 1.2x. Now there's 2 ways to think of this. If you factor the x out, right, you see we have 1 plus 0.2, so this is x times 1 plus 0.2. Or if you just add these 1x plus 0.2x, you get, that's going to be equal to 1.2x. So if you want to think about it in terms of fractions, you can say 1x is 100 100ths of x, plus we increase it by 20%, 20 100ths of x. 100 100ths x plus 20 100ths x is 120x. So it's like we're taking 120% of x, basically. So if you're increasing by 20%, that's the same as taking 120% of x. And again, we would just, if we have 120%, remember the rule, we move the decimal 2 places to the left. So if we do that, we get 1.2. So now we can multiply 1.2 by x, and that will give us 120% of x, i.e. x increased by 20%. So if a number is increased by a value, you basically figure out what the actual percent is that you're taking of x. Increased by 20% means we're taking 120% of x. You move your decimal over 2 places, you get 1.2, and you multiply that by x. So we have 1.2x. Now let's look at a decrease. What do we do for a decrease? If some number is decreased by 30%, well, we could take the initial number, let's say there's some number y, and subtract from y 30% of y. And that would get us the end result. But a really fast way to do this is to say, if I decrease by 30% a number, it means I start with 100% of that number, the entire number, and I subtract 30%. I'm left with 70%. 100% minus 30% is 70%. So decreasing a number by 30% is the same as taking 70% of the number. And again, we do that by multiplying the number by 0.7. Move the decimal 2 places to the left. So that's how you do an increase really quickly, and this is how you do a percent decrease really quickly. Now, let's see how do we solve this problem as a whole. X is increased by 20%, then decreased by 30. What's the end result? So X is increased by 20%. We said that is 1.2 times X. So this is the result of that operation. And then this number that we get as a result is decreased by 30%, i.e. we take 70% of it. So multiply 0.7, multiply the number by 0.7. So the number we get as a result of increasing X by 20% times 0.7. And when you multiply this out, 1.2 times 0.7 comes out to 0.84. So the answer would be you end up with 0.84x. In other words, what does this mean in terms of percents? If you start with x, you increase it by 20%, then decrease that by 30%, the number you end up with is 84% of the original number. And that is how you solve these. So you see, at the end of the day, when you see this problem, I just write 1.2 times x, parentheses, times 0.7, put it in the calculator, 0.84x. In like 10 to 20 seconds, I've solved this problem. So this is what you want to do, and it's going to be really, really fast. If you found this video helpful, please like it, share it, or subscribe to the channel, all of which will help me reach more people looking for this type of information. Thank you.